All right, so now this is the video for score 3. I've talked to you about 1, which we typically at Matamida is not an issue. We're jumping over number 2, which is just a little bit more than a number 1. So I'll briefly go over this, like the score assigned to the paper that makes an attempt to deal with the topic but demonstrates serious weakness. Typically the weakness comes in content, meaning like, are you providing evidence that is relevant, or coherence and or syntax and mechanics. Keep in mind that syntax just it's just sentence structure. So again, what they're talking about here is basically the grammar was problematic. So it's not coherent, right? It didn't develop a single idea, kind of jumped around. The syntax and mechanics were problematic, which means in general, like grammar. Descriptors include serious misreading, so like they went off in a different direction of the prompt, unacceptably brief, so they didn't allow themselves space for content here, and or poorly written. So the thing that I want to focus on with this one is that it says and or poorly written. So like you could have a wonderfully written paper, but if it's unacceptably brief or if there's a serious misreading, that is problematic. So it's nothing, they're not looking necessarily on style all the time. Style will definitely help you in the upper level essays, but down in these lower level essays, they want to make sure that you are on topic, you have content, and you are explaining yourself. But let's jump up to this 3 or 4. So they combine 3 and 4 together because they are pretty close, right? All of these scores on this page, all of the scores on page, what page is that? On page 163 in your essay, in your packet, these are all generally considered unacceptable, right? So they do not meet the minimum standards. So like it talks to you about 4, so averages, or excuse me, 4 is a below average paper, which maintains the general idea of the writing assignment. Okay, so that's something it's got going for it. The general idea shows some sense of organization. All right, so it's there, maybe not really all that strong, but at least it's present. It's weak in content, meaning like not enough evidence. Maturity of thought, so meaning that like it's a better word to talk about this might be like superficial. So what that means is that it's just on the surface. So like what that would look like for this prompt on page 160, the disobedience, is just focusing on what it means to be disobedient. You know, to be disobedient means that you're not following the rules, and here are some people that don't follow rules. If that student does not address the other part of the prompt, and the other part of the prompt, where is it? Where do I have it? Bloop, 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 bloop. So the second part of the prompt here is value a human trait and promote social progress. Like if they don't address social progress, that is definitely a lack of maturity and thought, because they're not considering, like they're talking about like whether or not it's a valuable trait. They're not addressing the bigger issue, which is, does it relate to social progress? Continuing, language facility and mechanics are also weak. So again, that has to do with grammar and word choice. Okay, so mechanics are grammar. Language facility is like how well you use your language. It may distort the topic or fail to deal adequately with one aspect of the topic. So again, having read this prompt, I'm going to tell you that a big thing that students did was that they just focused on the easy part, the valuable human trait, not the relationship to human progress. Okay, so the 3 is even less than that. It compounds the weakness of the 4. So what that means is that it has an even more vague understanding of the assignment. It has even less understanding of organization. The content is problematic, even more problematic. It's even more superficial, and the grammar and word choice is even more problematic. So a 3 and a 4 are pretty, like, the reason that they're clumped together is because you can say like, this is a 4, but that would make it a 3. So things that make it a 3 or a 4, words like incomplete, so they've not addressed the prompt completely, Oversimplified, so that has to do with maturity of thought. Meager, meaning like not a lot. Okay. Lacking in content. Okay. So meager meaning like pretty thin. Ooh. Irrelevant, meaning like sometimes they veer off topic, or and insufficient. Again, lacking in content. A lot of this has to do with like what the student is saying, how or content wise. So if we take a look at the argument prompt, organization suffers as it is unclear how ideas relate to one another. So what that would look like is like you've got multiple separate paragraphs that don't seem to relate. Evidence is mostly abstract or concrete, but more troubling is the lack of evidence. Sorry, coughing. So like the kinds of evidence is present, like at least there's some evidence, and it's totally, there's a lack of it entirely. So again, like what they're looking for is some kind of evidence. The three or four has it, but it's really, really problematic or really thin. Warrant is sometimes hinted at, so the overarching why this is important is sometimes there, but it's oftentimes just a guessing game. Like I have to try and figure it out myself. The writer only tries to answer the prompt, but even that is not successful. So like when it means like only tries to answer the prompt, what they're doing is they're just saying like it's very clear that this is an essay exam, or like this is an exam essay, meaning like there is no larger purpose for it. You're just doing it because somebody told you. And I know that's what you're doing. That is exactly what the test is. But what they like, it shouldn't read like that. It should read like this is your ideas. This is your, like, this is something that, this is your position, not someone else's position. Okay. So let's take a look at what a 3, actually, should we look at a 3 or should we look at a 4? Actually, let's take a look at the 4 on page 184 in your packet. So this up in the top corner, you should see DD, all right? So this is what a 4 would look like. An Irish author once mentioned that through disobedience, progress is made. All right, so I don't know why that's like that. Get out of here. But then, okay, so they are referencing the prompt in the sense that it is human nature and noted throughout history. Okay, so they're understanding like what they're being asked. I agree with the thought that disobedience is a valuable trait and promotes social progress in the sense that when laws and customs are found to be unjust, it is in their will and right to not abide by such customs. So the student is answering the prompt. So already I'm getting more than 1. And in fact, it's more than a 2 already just by the thesis, because they're presenting their position. And more like what I think is particularly interesting is that this student is addressing to the extent to which Wilde's claims are valid. So they're not just saying, yeah, I agree, I disagree. They're saying like this is when it can happen. So this is the extent. Excuse me. Man, I got hiccups and coughs all over the place. Anyways, continuing. Thus, such disobedience would stimulate change and awareness to the harsh realities of such laws. So this is a really strong position here. Disobedience used for change is even seen today with a series of strikes for work benefits and a change for budget cuts. So that's looking pretty good. They are articulating their position. It is a pretty clear position. So already they're on a good track. In fact, if I were to stop reading right now, this would probably earn a higher score than a 4. But we got to keep reading because you don't just assign a score based on the first paragraph. Let's keep reading. The trait of disobedience arises within people when they sense that following by standards will only do more harm than good. Again, this is a pretty clear position. Let's see how it continues. However, disobedience is only justified to the extent of defending a cause known to evoke pain or harm against another. Okay, so here's where we start to get a little problematic. The student has already said that. They've said that multiple times. They've said that all throughout this part of the essay. So like they're just repeating themselves here. Let's continue. Maybe they expand on it. It is not justified when selfish intention is presented or if it is used to negatively affect another. All right, so they're clarifying it a little bit here. But I would still like to see, like, when do you see this happening? Where does this happen? Do you have any evidence? So I'm going to try to spell it out. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Look at how fun that is. Just watching Miss Haynes spell evidence like a chump. But let's continue. Disobedience influences change as seen in the past through uprisings and strikes that have stimulated awareness in the fault of things such as workers' rights. So this is a really good example of more abstract ideas. So like mostly abstract or concrete, but troubling lack of evidence in general. So they are referencing something, but they're not giving the actual evidence. Like when did this actually happen? Such acts of defiance are specialized to grand scale issues. What does that mean? I have no idea what that means. However, if a person is defiant on the means of simply not wanting to go to school or even abide by traffic laws, can put them in harm's way for not being at the right place at the right time, or can put others in harm's way. What? How does not going to school put other people in harm's way? Now, abiding traffic laws is one thing, but this is where they're starting to go off the rails. Notice how they had a really clear position up here, but now they're having a hard time supporting this. So like, this is problematic because they do not expand on this idea. Continuing. It is observed that when an act of disobedience occurs at a grand scale due to something affecting a large group of people, then there is a cause to see what progress is not being made. What? What does that mean? Then there is a cause to see what progress is not being made? What? I don't even know what that means. What's the cause? What's the progress? How do you know? Like, that seems pretty vague. However, if one's actions does not catalyze, that's a good word choice, others like a chain reaction, then there is reason to question the person's motives. Oh, jeez. Motives. So this is a really good example of a 4 because they have a really good position here, but then when they are asked to support it, it literally just falls apart. And notice how the grammar starts to get more problematic as we get down here too. There's sentences that don't make sense. They're using words that aren't even words. Some of the words are great, but others, like an entire sentence doesn't make sense. And so if I look back at my essay, or excuse me, the score of a 4, the general idea of writing assignment, so they've got they answered the prompt, show some sense of organization. Their thesis did, weak in content, holy moly spicoli, that's for sure. Maturity in thought, they just kept saying, oh, that shows progress, that shows progress. They never actually explain to me how that progress happens. Language facility and or mechanics, so like the grammar was pretty problematic there. So like this is a 4. If you stopped reading after this first paragraph, then hey, that's a good essay. But notice how they cannot support it and the ideas are much more unclear. In the next essay, we'll take a look at 5-6, and you'll look at some examples there. What?